If you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn to Daniel chapter 10. We'll be reading, John, we're only going to be reading, I'm going to read through verse 13 today. We're not going to read the entire chapter. I forgot to mention that to you. I'm sorry. But while you're getting there to Daniel chapter 10, and I know you've heard this before, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What is the difference between ignorance and apathy? I don't know, and I don't care, right? So in one instance, someone just doesn't have knowledge of a situation, they're ignorant. In the second, they know about the situation, but they do not attach any importance to it. They're apathetic. Which one, here's the second question, which one of those situations is held more responsible? If someone's ignorant, someone's apathetic, who would you hold more responsible in the event of something bad happening? The apathetic, right? The one who has apathy, right? Because there's another saying that ignorance is bliss. And that's because if we don't know about a situation or if we can plead ignorance, then we can't, most time we're not really expected to be held responsible for a negative result or negative outcome. But there's yet another saying. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Some things are just the way they are, whether we have explicit knowledge of them or not. Does anyone here have a degree in physics? Are you a physicist? Do you have a degree in physics? Anybody? Okay. You may not have nobody has a physicist's knowledge of the law of gravity, but you still feel the effects when you fall down. You're ignorant of all the ins and outs of gravity. You can't do all the formulas and you may not know the rate of acceleration and all those things, but if you fall down, you still feel it, don't you? Whether you're ignorant of it or not, of course, none of us are totally ignorant of gravity, but you still feel the effects. And with regard to man's laws, not natural laws, but man's laws, some things are always wrong, whether you know specifically about them or not. And you will be held accountable for violating them. Some things, you may not know the full law, but they're written on your conscience, right? They're written in your heart. God has put them there. So ignorance is not always foolproof. We were very clear last week, that we do not have full knowledge of the invisible spiritual realm which is all around us. We are material, physical beings, and we simply cannot perceive such things, at least without help. We can't see into the invisible spiritual realm on our own. But sometimes God chooses to reveal them. Nevertheless, whether we can see it or not, that spiritual reality, the truth of God, the concept of holiness, sinfulness, heaven and hell, angels and demons, all of these spiritual realities have or will have a profound effect on our lives. Even if we're somewhat ignorant of it because we can't see it, they will affect us eventually, if not already. If we do not perceive these truths fully now, we will eventually. And pleading ignorance at that time will be no excuse. In fact, the Bible, one of the reasons we can't plead ignorance is because the Bible reveals plainly all of these truths to the extent that we need to know them. And we, in our lives, whether we think we have or not, we have either already declared or we will declare for one side spiritually. One side or the other. So let's see what we can see today in Daniel chapter 10 about the intriguing insights into the invisible, as I've called it. Again, we're just going to read through verse 13 this time. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a message was revealed to Daniel, whose name was called Belteshazzar. The message was true, but the appointed time was long. And he understood the message and had understanding of the vision. In those days, and now he's relating about that. In those days, I, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks. I ate no pleasant food, nor meat, or wine came into my mouth, nor did I anoint myself at all, till 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. Now on the 24th day of the 1st month, as I was by the side of the great river, that is the Tigris, I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose waist was girded with gold of Uphaz. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like torches of fire, his arms and feet like burnished bronze in color, and the sound of his words like the voice of a multitude. And I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, for the men who were with me did not see the vision, but a great terror fell upon them, so that they fled to hide themselves. Therefore I was left alone when I saw this great vision, and no strength remained in me, for my vigor was turned to frailty in me, and I retained no strength. Yet I heard the sound of his words, and while I heard the sound of his words, I was in a deep sleep on my face, with my face on the ground. Suddenly a hand touched me, which made me tremble on my knees and on the palms of my hands. And he said to me, O Daniel, man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak to you and stand upright, for I have now been sent to you. While he was speaking this word to me, I stood trembling. Then he said to me, do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come because of your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, and behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left alone there with the kings of Persia. We'll stop there today. The rest of the chapter describes Daniel's continued reaction to the messenger, and then how the messenger gave him strength, and then he started to give him a little more information. The real message starts in chapter 11, which we will get to eventually. But for now, we're gonna focus on this aspect of chapter 10. So let's stop and let's pray for a moment. Lord, again, we just want to pause before you, acknowledge that you're the reason we're here today, and I pray that you would just help our understanding, open our minds and our hearts, and help us to see the truths here that you have chosen to reveal to us. Help us to not be ignorant. We can only know so much as human beings. We can only see so much. But what we do see and we understand and we hear from the Bible, help us to accept it as true, and help us to realize that there is really a great spiritual war going on. It is intriguing in some ways, but help us to be not so intrigued with the mystery of it, but help us to want to know what we can know so that we might be involved in the war, so that we might take your side, and so that we might fight on your behalf and for the kingdom that you have established. And so we ask all these things today in Jesus' name. Amen. So last time we concluded with thoughts about how angelic beings are organized into a hierarchy. And in those some of those passages we looked at, military terms were often used. And that brings up a second point of insight that we can see from this passage, and which is confirmed by this passage about angelic beings, namely that they are occupied with heavenly warfare. They are occupied with heavenly warfare. And you're following along in the bulletin. You want to fill in the blanks there. The point A under occupied with heavenly warfare is that it is a foreseeable clash. It is a foreseeable clash. We need to recognize that this contest or this combat between Michael and God's faithful angels, the good angels, are against Lucifer and his rebellious fallen evil angels. It's not a hard thing for us to embrace, is it? It's not a hard thing to acknowledge that it must be true. Because when two diametrically opposed forces, and I cannot think of anything that is more polar opposite than good and evil, When two diametrically opposed forces try to operate and have dominion in the same arena, in the same sphere or area of influence, if they're both trying to occupy the same space and trying to achieve a common goal, so to speak, but they're diametrically opposed to the goals they have, there cannot help but be hostilities between them. We're going to talk in a little bit about how mankind is involved in this spiritual battle, but for now, let's just focus on how this struggle appears as we see it portrayed in passages like ours today. What does the battle look like from what we can see in the Bible? Well, in our passage today, it seems a feature of the conflict, that's B, features of the conflict, it seems evenly matched at times. We saw this in verse 13. The angelic messenger attempted to reach Daniel immediately, but he was stymied. He was stopped. He was delayed for 3 weeks, 21 days. He is not banished by the enemy. He is not destroyed by the enemy. He's just held up. He's just obstructed. So it seems, in this case at least, that the messenger angel that's trying to talk to Daniel, and does eventually talk to Daniel, and this one that is named the Prince of the Kingdom of Persia, were either very evenly matched, or maybe the evil, the fallen angel, the bad angel, had more power, but he was just not allowed to do anything other than delay the good angel. And this is where our ignorance kicks in, you see. We have no way of knowing what this really looks like when spiritual warfare is going on. We have no way of knowing what sort of powers are available to these spirit beings, these angels. We have no way of knowing what kind of weapons they use. We hear in Revelation that Michael has a sword, but we don't know if that's spiritual or figurative or literal. We don't know. We don't know what tactics these beings can use or may use, what they're allowed to do against each other, or what the consequences of those actions would be. We have seen last week, excuse me for my coughing, we have seen last week that some of these angels are higher in rank, apparently have more strength, more authority than other angels. These ranks we saw exist on both the holy angel side and the fallen angel side. They're both organized into hierarchies. And we also know that at times it seems the Lord takes a more direct hand in what he allows these angels to do, especially the evil angels. You may recall, and one example of this, I'm not going to turn to the passage because I'm sure in fact we talked about it a little bit last week, that Jesus was begged by the demons named Legion, and that man that was out in the graveyard, going crazy all the time. He was possessed by a number of demons called Legion, and they begged Jesus not to cast them into the abyss, but be allowed instead to go into that herd of swine. So that passage and other passages in various places demonstrate that evil spirits can only go so far before God reins them in. They are ultimately on a leash, so to speak, in what they may and they may not do in this world. And I'll just throw this in as an aside. On our website, several years ago, we did a study on angels, holy and fallen, and Satan. And that study is posted on our website. And if you want to, it goes into a lot more detail about a lot more ideas and other passages, of course, and how that God, in some certain cases, definitely limited fallen angels in their ability to do certain things, especially with regard to human beings. And so, if you're interested, we don't have time to go into it today, but if you're interested in more of that, I think I can tell you that study is very biblically based. I made sure that I wanted scriptural evidence for everything that I suggested or contemplated. And there's several good authors cited as well. So if you're more interested in that, just go to our website under studies and you'll find that one there. But speaking of God, and specifically speaking of Jesus, I wanted to throw this in. Casey started to bring this up on Wednesday night, and I had to cut him off. I said, no, we're getting there, Casey. Didn't want him to spoil it for everybody. But speaking of Jesus, some interpreters of this passage see the messenger angel as a depiction of Jesus himself. Or in other words, they see the messenger angel as a Christophany. And what that is, it's a pre-incarnate, before he actually was born into the world, God the Son appeared in a form. He wasn't truly human, he just appeared as he's described. In fact, that's the big reason that some people think this is a pre-incarnate example of Jesus Christ appearing and doing something, because of what is said about him in verses 5 and 6. Let's read those again. I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man. So he's appearing as a man, this messenger, clothed in linen, whose waist was girded with gold of Uphaz. His body was like beryl, that's a precious stone, as I shared last time. His face like the appearance of lightning. His eyes like torches of fire, his arms and feet like burnished bronze in color, and the sound of his words like the voice of a multitude. And so people see that, and then in Revelation chapter 1, verses 12 through 16, and we see this description, and this is definitely the Son of God. And this is John writing, of course, the book of Revelation. Then I turned to see the voice that spoke with me, and having turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands, and in the midst of the 7 lampstands, one like the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the feet, and girded about the chest with a golden band. His head and hair were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes like a flame of fire. His feet were like fine brass, or bronze, as is refined in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters. He had in his right hand 7 stars. Out of his mouth went a sharp 2-edged sword, and his countenance was like the sun, shining in its strength. And as you can see, there are very similar depictions there. You know, Daniel's describing it one way, and John's describing it using slightly different words, but you can see the similarities, and you would expect some differences of wording if 2 different men are just trying to describe the same thing. If Danella was trying to describe something and Chris was trying to describe something, and you asked them both what they saw, but separately, they'd probably use different words, right? And so so some people look at that and they say, wow, well, that means probably, we know in Revelation that's Jesus, so maybe in Daniel that was Jesus. The only problem with that is, it's hard to see God the Son being delayed by a demon for 21 days and being apparently helpless against him so that Michael would have to come and rescue him. So I have a hard time with the idea that this is Jesus in the book of Daniel, that it's a Christophany. So I reject that idea based on that. Now, are we working a little bit out of ignorance of things? Yes, absolutely. But that's my thinking and my logic on that. But thinking in those terms, Jesus wouldn't be delayed by a demon, by a fallen angel, by this prince of the kingdom of Persia. But the question then becomes, well, Pastor, why would God let any of his servants, any of his holy angels, any of his, he sent them on a mission. He sent this messenger angel to talk to Daniel. Why would he let any of them be frustrated at times by these fallen angels? Why wouldn't he just give them the authority and the power to just blast through any resistance and just go do what he sent them to do? Ignorance kicks in here. We cannot answer that question completely. I can give you a guess, though. I think it's a fairly well-reasoned guess. It might be similar to why churches here on earth and individual Christians here on earth struggle in this old world at times because of the fall. And when I say the fall, I'm talking about, of course, the choices of Adam and Eve in the garden. Because that happened, sin, evil, death have a legitimate place in this broken existence. Those things, sin, evil, death, and Satan, they have a right to exist in this reality and even exercise a degree of power on this earth under the current state of affairs, under the current existence. Now, we know, and this is our great hope, this is what we're looking forward to, one day the Lord will return. He will intervene directly to judge and remove all evil, remove death. But until then, it seems he has given part of the battle over to his servants. He's given the battle over to his angels and to his faithful human followers. So we humans are responsible also for resisting evil and spreading the gospel and being involved in the spiritual warfare that's going on. Even though we can't see it, we have marching orders, we have instructions, we know, and we can see the effect of the spiritual brokenness of this world easily, can't we? Obviously, God provides help, God provides strength, and without God's involvement, we would fail miserably and completely in our effort to battle in the spiritual warfare. And so without God, nothing can be accomplished. But that doesn't remove responsibility from us. He calls us and he entrusts us to be diligent and be faithful and use our resources, what he has placed into our hands, for his kingdom rather than only for ourselves. Remember the old saying, God blesses you to be a blessing. Some of us, sometimes we think, well, God's blessed me so I can consume it. And that is the problem a lot of times in this selfish world. But we as Christians, we need to understand he entrusts us to be faithful with what he gives us. And sometimes it seems, as we're involved in the battle, he allows us to have setbacks, doesn't he? Even defeats at times. At least it seems like a defeat. It seems like a setback. It seems like we lost that encounter and Satan won. Two things about that. One, looks can be deceiving, and God is often at work. It looked at first like Jesus was defeated on the cross, didn't it? And yet through that terrible ordeal, a great victory was won. So keep that in mind. Looks can sometimes be deceiving. Sometimes we feel like we've lost, and God is using it beyond the loss to achieve something greater. So that's one thing. But the other thing is, when we go through a negative time in the struggle, in the warfare, in the battle, usually you'll learn something from that, don't you? Don't we all as human beings tend to learn more from our hard times, our difficult times, than we do in our prosperity? We learn more in adversity than we do in prosperity. And so many times when God allows those things to happen, we learn something from those events, and we're challenged to be even more faithful. If this is what happens when I'm negligent, when I'm half-hearted, when I'm just kind of going through the motions, if that's the result, I don't like that result, I need to be more faithful. I need to spend more time praying. I need to spend more time in the Word. I need to spend more time talking to people about God, being more diligent about those things. So what I'm saying is he allows that to happen to us because he's still teaching us. He's still training us. He's still, that's the old song, he's still working on me to make me what I ought to be. And so he's still working on us. Now, here's an interesting question. Is God still training and disciplining his angels too when they go through defeats? When they are delayed on their mission, is God still teaching them things? Are they going through the same kind of things we're going through? I've never really thought about it like that. I always had the idea that the angels are a finished product. So I can't come down on either side. I really do think angels are more, now that they've been confirmed, now that they've chosen between God and Satan, they've chosen sides and they're kind of a finished product. But who knows? Maybe it could be that God allowed this 21-day delay because he wanted to teach Daniel something about the nature of spiritual warfare. Maybe that's God's purpose. Maybe it's all about Daniel and Daniel writing this down so that now we can see there really is a warfare and there's a battle and it's a struggle. It's not just, the reality of evil is real in this world. It's not just been, it's not something that's been made up. It's an ongoing struggle between good and evil. Now, my use of the word ongoing brings up, I think, another feature of the conflict. We said it's evenly matched, it seems, at times, but it also seems to be an endless melee. Look at verse 20. Then he said, "Do you know why I have come to you? And now I must return to fight with the prince of Persia, and when I have gone forth, indeed, also when I've gone forth, indeed, the prince of Greece will come." So although this messenger, with Michael's help, had won a battle and completed his current task, he was about to complete it as he gave Daniel the message in chapter 11, this messenger shares, I need to immediately, when I'm done here, I'm going to immediately return to the fray. I've got to immediately go back and face my opponent again, because he will not retreat and he will not surrender. He's not giving up. They will fight until Persia's time of dominance is over, and then the demonic influence will be replaced by one which seeks to control personalities and events in the Greek Empire. So it's ongoing. It seems like an endless melee. He wasn't, this messenger says, I'm not about to be slack in my duty because the heavenly wars are not over. We've still got work to do. And as I thought about that, I couldn't help but ask the question, what about us? What about us? We've already seen that we are enlisted in the same spiritual conflict as the holy angels. Now, they can see it more clearly. They see it in a different perspective. They're spiritual beings. But even as physical, material beings, as I mentioned a little earlier, even we can see how bad things are in this old, simple world, can't we? Have you ever seen anybody's lives that's been ruined and broken with sin? With addiction? With just tragedy? How much pain and sorrow that people suffer around us? How much wickedness and evil intent and violence and oppression exist in human hearts? Yet even with seeing that, even as we are aware of that, we watch the news or we just see it in everyday life. Isn't it a temptation to want to go find an insulated corner somewhere where things aren't so bad? Oh, I'm going to move out of state. I'm going to move down to the Bible Belt. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go there. I'm going to find a refuge. And why do I need to be involved in I've hidden scriptures in my heart. I know what the Bible says. I've got a Bible. I read it regularly. I even pray fairly regularly. And I'm faithful to go to church. And, and my church is doing okay, by the way. And we may think, I've served a long time. And you know what? I've done my share. Let somebody else do it for a while. I'm gonna step back and I'm gonna resign. I'm gonna retire. I'm gonna sit it out for now. Probably all of us have felt that way a little bit here and there, haven't we? I can tell you I have. And look, I'm not saying there's not a time to change roles or that we can't take a respite to recharge a little. We are flesh and blood. And I know that. We certainly don't want people to burn out. And we also know that, it's not our battle. The battle is the Lord's, we're told in the Scriptures. His strategy, His success in this whole endeavor is not dependent on any one person, unless, of course, you want to say that one person was Jesus, is Jesus. I'll get on board with that. But as far as we're concerned, certainly not any one of us is God's purposes and plans dependent on. And the point I'm trying to make is no one is expected to do it all by himself or herself. We don't need to feel overwhelmed by the responsibility. But we do all need to do our part. We must understand that our enemy continues in his relentless attack on humanity. What is it Peter said? The devil is going around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. And he never stops. The battle is ongoing. And our fight song is Onward Christian Soldiers, not let's build a fort and hunker down right here for a while. We are expected to be faithful. We're expected to serve where God has placed us. You say, well, Pastor, I'm trying, but just doesn't seem like anything's happening. And you're right. Sometimes it may seem like you're not accomplishing much. But as I said earlier, that can sometimes be deceiving. I'm going to read this to you. I've probably read this before. You may have heard it before, and you know where it's going. But every time I read it, I'm moved by it, and I wanted to share it with you again this morning. And the story goes this way. It was early morning, and on the beach was an elderly man. He walked with a cane, carefully surveying the beach that the receding tide had left exposed. Every now and then, he bent over to pick up something and toss it in the ocean. The writer of this says, I watched him with fascination as he continued to do this over and over again. As I drew closer to him, I realized he was looking for starfish. Every time he saw one lying helpless in the sand, unable to get back to the ocean, he would pick it up and lovingly toss it back into the sea. Curious, I approached him and asked him why he was doing this. And his reply was, well, if I don't, they will be dried out by the hot summer sun and they'll die. I smiled at him and said, sir, but there are endless miles of beach. And there must be thousands or millions of starfish. Surely you don't think you can save them all. What difference do you think your efforts can possibly make? He did not answer immediately. But slowly the old man bent over and picked up another starfish. As he tossed it into the ocean, he just looked at me and said, it makes a difference to that one. You know, we can't do it all. But if we give up, if we stop completely, what will happen to that one that God wanted you to help and influence and talk to on His behalf? Satan won't stop. Neither should we. It's not like the U.S. military where you get your 20 and then you retire. We're always in God's army. Whatever position we're in, we need to keep fighting on His behalf. These thoughts bring us to the third final point of insight that we might draw from this passage. And the question is, what is the ultimate? They're fighting, okay, they're fighting. What is the ultimate goal in many of the spiritual conflicts that angels, holy and fallen, fight with each other about? Perhaps it could be summed up as orchestrating human affairs. That's the third point, main point, orchestrating human affairs. And then there's the basis of the conflict. What is the basis of the conflict? You know, God's creation is centered on this world and is mainly centered on its inhabitants, and I'm especially talking about mankind. We are God's highest created mortal being. We are made in His image. Into our care, He has given this world. He made us we share dominion with it because God gave it into our hands. And mankind, I would submit to you, is at the heart of the battle, of the fight, the spiritual warfare. We human beings are the disputed territory. God's purpose, what He wants to accomplish as a result of this spiritual warfare, He is served and He is supported by His angels. His purpose is that all men and women should know, worship, and serve Him. Now, that's not to feed God's ego. It's not because He just wants to dominate people, but rather He knows that this is the reason we were made in the first place. So that we talked about this in the 9:30 service. So that He made us because He wanted to have fellowship with us. He wanted to love us, and He wanted us to love Him. He made us to have fellowship with our Creator and enjoy eternal life with Him in His perfect kingdom and a perfect home forever. The Lord God, again, loves us and knows what is best for us. He wants our allegiance and our loyalty, not for His sake, but for our sake. That's God's purpose. Satan's purpose, his goal, is to tear mankind away from God so that we are turned instead to trying to fill our lives with our own ineffective and failing purposes and efforts, right? We seek fulfillment. We seek distraction. We seek entertainment. We seek whatever will keep us occupied and content. Or we find in him, Satan, the devil, or some other false god, a substitute object of worship, which might create a short-term sense of fulfillment. It might bring peace. I'm following Confucius. I'm at peace. That kind of thing. Peace of mind. I'm going to meditate, and I'm going to come back and be. I'm going to be at balance with the world. All those kinds of things. They might bring a short-term sense of fulfillment or peace, but as we understand, we know it will end in disaster and terrible destruction in a place outside of God's kingdom called hell. So when we stay willfully ignorant of God, or we say, I'm just not going to choose. I'm going to be unaffiliated. I'm not going to choose God or Satan. I'm just going to kind of be in no man. Or we outright reject Him. Whatever those three, we just want to stay ignorant of everything, or we reject Him, or we just try to stay neutral. We unwittingly become slaves to sin and slaves to Satan instead. Some want to just say, I'm not going to be ignorant, I'm just going to be apathetic. I'm going to remain unaffiliated. But as the old song by Bob Dylan reiterates, you're going to have to serve somebody. In other words, there is no neutral ground in this war. The opening, you say, well, God's creator. Satan is a created being. We saw that. He's just a fallen angel, maybe the highest one. But God's all-powerful. How can he fight against God? The opening that Satan has is that God allows human beings the freedom of self-determination, free will, in this matter of who we will serve. You can choose to not serve God. You can choose to serve Satan. You can choose to serve yourself. And because since we in our flesh we cannot see all the spiritual realities around us, and we have the free will to choose what we want, we are susceptible to manipulation. We are susceptible to spiritual deception. The devil takes full advantage of that. And he places his evil agents in places of influence so that people are drawn away from God and toward their own sinful agendas. And if it's a sinful agenda, it's in accordance with Satan's agenda. All Satan wants to do or has to do is distract us from our Creator, the true and living, good and loving Jehovah God. He doesn't have to make us be Satan worshipers. He doesn't have to make us do this or that. He just needs to present something that will appeal to us and make us turn away from God. And we help him ourselves because of our own heart. We're born with sinful natures, and we're born with that free will. And sometimes we're not naturally drawn to God. We need God to draw us to himself. And then you have to choose. The good news is God doesn't simply concede mankind who he loves to the devil. He sends his forces into the fray. He sends his angels into the fray to contest every soul and to make sure that each one has that chance to choose God. I believe that firmly. I believe anyone who wants light will receive light. And if you want light and God sends you light and you continue to want more, he'll send you more. And I know there are arguments about, well, what about the heathen lost in the backside of Africa or India or wherever? I don't know how all that, I can't answer all those questions. I just truly believe that our loving God will send light to the hearts that want it. I believe that with everything I am. I have to believe that, because that's the only way Jesus could have died for everyone, is if he gives them a chance to respond. So that's the basis of the conflict. It's mankind. They're fighting over us. And then there's a battle for control. How does the battle work? What is the actual process of the fight? And I think we can see an example of that again in verse 13. The messenger angel says, "For I had been left alone there with the kings of Persia." First we need to ask, well, who are the kings of Persia? The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, and behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left alone there with the kings of Persia. So there's a prince of Persia and a king of Persia. And I believe those are in distinction from each other. The princes we've already seen, and we see it in verse 20, the prince of Persia, the prince of Greece. And I suggested this last week, submitted this. They are the fallen angelic servants of Lucifer. The kings of Persia are the human rulers of that nation. And I believe we can see confirmation of that in chapter 11, verse 2. When the messenger starts telling Daniel what's going to happen in the future, this is what he says, "And now we'll tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings will arise in Persia, and the fourth shall be far richer than them all. By his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece." And that happened in history. Persia wanted to dominate everywhere, and they picked a fight with Greece. They wanted to move into into Macedonia and Greece, and they wanted to control that part of the world as well. And of course, that was kind of like Russia was to Hitler. They ran into trouble, and they were defeated eventually. So these are historic things, and these kings are the human rulers of these realms. Now, going back to verse 13, there are 2 ways to interpret that phrase, "For I had been left alone there with the kings of Persia."